So China is buying all this gold in USD, but it's selling the gold in China in RMB, right? So in essence, if China bid up the price of gold, the domestic Chinese guys bid up the price of gold in RMB, yen, the US dollar price of gold has to follow the RMB. It's the same piece of gold, right? Unless Commodities and LBMA want all their gold to be drained by China. And that's not acceptable to those guys. So that's why China pushed the gold aggregate button, and it is allowing its public to withdraw physical gold on a one-to-one basis from the banks.
This is Little by Little with Andy Schechtman.
All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Little by Little. If you guys have been following me for a long time, you know a lot of what I have focused on has been things such as the Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRICS, or China's gold accumulation. So many of these things, I have really not had the opportunity to talk with someone who really knows what's going on the other side of the world. And I'm thrilled to bring into the podcast today, Eric Yeung. Eric is someone who I've been following for many reasons, including his expertise on precious metals and his perspective on what's happening in China and Hong Kong. Eric, it's great to have you, brother. Thank you for coming on today. And then how you doing?
I'm doing great, Eddie. Thank you for having me on, and it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Likewise. We'll jump right into things, Eric. And I know it's very late where you are right now in Hong Kong, and I'm very appreciative of you jumping on. Let's start with just the basic question. What inspired you into the financial world and maybe real life experiences in the business world that shaped your views on things like precious metals? And what's very important to me is the global shift, such as the role of BRICS. And I would just be interested in knowing what got you here and what shaped your perspectives.
Okay, well, I'm actually in the contract manufacturing business. So what I do is I take customer orders all over the world, and I find factories in China. We manufacture the items to spec to whatever our customers want them to be manufactured into, and then we ship it off to our customers. So I've been doing that for 20 plus years, and I'm based out in Hong Kong and China as well, southern China. And in terms of me dabbling in precious metals, the first big batch of physical gold I bought was after 2008, the financial crisis. So I saw that happened, and back then I didn't know a lot about physical gold and silver. I just said to myself, I have to have something real in my head that I can touch, that I can hold on to, just in case all things go to hell. I still have that. So that's how I got into it.
Well, and that really is, I think, the reason to own gold is not because you're doing it to become wealthy, but rather because it is wealth and has been for 5,000 years and through everything the world has ever thrown at it, from hyperinflation to Great Depression to 2 world wars, etc. And I think that is the proper perspective. And glad to hear you say that, because to me, gold is wealth. And that is the guiding light that I have followed for going on 35 years now. Regarding BRICS, seeing as that, so much of what is happening is right there in your backyard, do you believe that they are positioned to establish, let's call it a sustainable alternative to the Western-dominated global financial system?
I think so. And I look at it from China's perspective. So if you look at, what President Xi did since he became the leader of China, the president of China, he initiated 2 things. One is the China Manufacturing 2025, Manufactured in China 2025. And the second initiative is the Belt and Road Initiative. So the way I see these things, you can see it in a lot of different lenses, but essentially what they are is they secure China's energy. It's about energy security, basically, for China going forward. And as you know, China is a net importer of energy. So it was, in President Xi's perspective, it was very important for China to build the Belt and Road Initiative so that China can trade directly to these BRICS countries that actually are net exporters of energy. And in such way that ongoing, China don't need to depend on energy imports from the West. So I think, if we look at the Belt and Road Initiative for the last 6-7 years and how it developed and where we are going today, I think China has achieved a level of success with that. And then on the other hand, you have the Manufactured in China 2025, which is China's initiative to basically what I call climb the value chain ladder. So in the past, as you know, China manufactured all the cheap stuff, cheap electronics, cheap furniture, etc. In the last 5 to 7 years, China really ramped up in its climbing of the value ladder in manufacturing. So now China actually makes high-end products like smartphones, EVs, and solar panel systems, and high-end electronics as well, right? And again, I see that China has achieved a very high level of success. If you look at all these high-end products that is manufacturing, is actually taking market share away from the incumbent Western manufacturers like Europe and Japan.
Yeah, I think that is true on many levels, and the way that you explained it is the way that I think it's very accurate. Because at one point, I think people did think the products that came from China didn't have the quality. Certainly, they had the ability to manufacture in scale, but now, to your point, I think the quality is something that is on par with most of the countries that produce things, and I'm sure that sent shivers down the spine of the folks in Europe and the manufacturers in the United States. But that's the natural progression of things. And to your point on the Belt Road Initiative, I was going to go a different way, but I want to ask this question first because that's what really got me down this rabbit hole in 2019 is understanding the Belt Road Initiative. I don't think enough people understand the significance. It represents pretty darn well near 75% of human population as is right now, over 50% of global GDP. And it's connecting through a series of bridges and roads and railways and maritime channels, all of these countries. It's the Panama Canal on steroids. It will be patrolled by military and commerce. It is, in essence, a very, very, very important thing, I think, for the West to not underestimate. And the West is not part of it. With that in mind, the other day, a few weeks ago, I noticed something that has gotten very little attention, and I'm fairly certain you're keen on this, and that is China's issuance of an oversubscribed issuance of U.S. dollar-denominated bonds that they listed in Saudi Arabia, which I think was very significant from an image perspective, and it was also interesting that these bonds were rated rated A+ by the rating agencies. My question to you is, it's one thing to issue dollar-denominated bonds instead of that money going to the United States to purchase our bonds, which can help us buy more stuff or just spend more with tremendous irresponsibility. Do you think that one of the reasons that they would do this would be to provide liquidity for the underdeveloped Belt and Road countries to help repay back their dollar debts? We keep hearing about the demand for the dollar, the milkshake theory, because all of these countries need dollars, obviously, to repay their dollar-denominated debts. But they could then restructure it so that instead of being paid back in dollars to China, they could be paid back, to your point, in energy, oil, gas, minerals, precious metals, while at the same time showing the West that, be careful because we can undermine the demand for your U.S. treasuries. Am I on the right path with that, you think?
I think you're absolutely correct. You're right, Andy. And one interesting tidbit is that, when this news first broke out, I believe that the yield for these China issued U.S. dollar, sovereign bonds had a yield slightly above U.S. Treasury bonds for the same duration. Okay, it was slightly above. It was, a couple basis points, right?
I remember that. Yes,
but
virtually
recently,
nothing.
Yeah, virtually nothing. But recently, I see that the yield for these bonds actually dropped below what the U.S. Treasury is pumping up. So in essence, I think just by that, price action right there is proving your point. The only reason why, the yield would drop below U.S. Treasury bond yields, which is supposed to be the most secure, most pristine collateral in the universe, right? Would be exactly what you said, is that, that Chinese collateral is good for the energy trade. It's good for the BRICS trade. Whereas the U.S. Treasury, bonds may not be as conveniently used in that scenario. Plus, you have Uncle Sam, holding the leashes on that, right? So what you're describing is essentially a Eurodollar system not under the control of Washington.
I don't think people get that, Eric.
Yes.
Eric, that's just massive, right? I mean, that's massive.
So basically, China has taken, the milkshake weapon and turned it against the U.S. I mean, it's a reverse milkshake. I always said that. That's what this is.
Yeah, and that's. Do you think that was a shot across the bow, in relation to the threats that Trump has on tariffs? Like, you want to play hardball, so can we? Do you think this is something we will see much more of, or regardless of it being tit for tat, simply because they realize what they have here as a way to ingratiate and bring in these countries who will appreciate all that China is doing for them in doing this, helping them repay their dollar-denominated debts, and at the same time allowing them to reap the rewards of receiving energy in return? It's a win-win for China and for these countries on the Belt Road. So do you think that this is something we're going to see more of, regardless of the pushback from the United States?
You're going to see more of this for sure, because China doesn't do financial saber rattling. I'm just going to put it in that particular term. They don't do it. When they do something like what we're talking about here, it's something that they're planned for a long time and that they're going to roll out in stages. So I believe this is just the first step to a larger plan that is being carried out and executed by China over the long run.
What is the trade surplus that China has? Do you know what that is per year, roughly?
You know what? That's a very good question, Andy. It just got up to $1 trillion a year. Just recently. The most recent number is $1 trillion US dollars.
Yeah, so they're sitting on enough dollars to issue dollar-denominated bonds for the foreseeable future. I think this is something, Eric, that more people need to understand. In fact, to me, this is as relevant and as important as anything I've ever talked to someone who I've interviewed about. And thank you for opening my eyes just to the fact that the yields have now dropped below Uncle Sam's. That should open people's eyes, because the U.S., the reason everyone talks about, including the milkshake theory, the demand for U.S. treasuries is because it is the most stable, the safest, the least amount of risk, etc. And we've proven through weaponization and sanctions and now inflation and all, and then this. Hey, that may not be the ultimate truth. So thank you for that. I could talk about that for much longer than we probably should. So I will let that ruminate and sink in. And I hope people rewind this and listen to that point again, because that is massive in my mind. Let's talk a little bit about gold. And along the same lines of challenging the West, China has been accumulating its gold reserves in recent years, a trend that we have seen accelerating. They're also the largest producer of gold in the world. They've also been importing gold, I guess you could say, somewhat under the table, and they were kind of caught by that with the import-export numbers. I don't think people understand the amount of gold that the People's Liberation Army purchases, or that the proxy banks on behalf of the PBOC purchase. My question is, do you think that all of this gold accumulation is part of a broader strategy, not just the historical significance of gold to China, to the Chinese, but is it a strategy to challenge the dominance of the dollar ultimately?
Okay, I want to take one step back, because what we just finished with and what you're asking now is interconnected. Now, the reason why I say that is because China has right now $1 trillion of surplus, right? And as you probably know, Andy, China is no longer adding, well, as a matter of fact, they're letting stuff roll off. They're no longer adding new US treasuries into their holdings. They're letting stuff roll off, and they're simply not buying new ones. So what are they doing? Like you said, some of it they're using to support their BRICS partners. They're issuing US dollar denominated Chinese sovereign bonds with some of the surplus. Okay, and it's not all that, right? Because I mean, you have people like Saudi Arabia recycling their US dollars into that system, as we have learned, right? So that's one leg. Imagine that's one of the legs of that stew that China is building. Okay, the second leg is what? All these US dollars, trade surpluses, like they actually sit in the bank accounts of the of Chinese companies that sell stuff to the West, like your DVD player, your TV, your EV, your whatever, right? All these products they sell to the West, they get US dollars, right? These Chinese companies. So right now, a lot of these US dollars are sitting in Chinese bank accounts of these companies. So what do? They take those US dollars, go to the PBOC, exchange it to RMB, yen, the Chinese currency, and they buy Chinese sovereign bonds denominated in RMB. That's why you see the RMB sovereign bond, the yen sovereign bond, the yield is dipping below 2%. That's the real reason. It's not because China is getting into a financial crisis. It's because China's trade surplus is going up in a straight line. And there's all this excess US dollar currency that is being recycled instead of US treasuries into Chinese sovereign bonds. Do you see that? So that's the second leg of the stew, right? The third leg is what you just talked about, physical gold. So China is buying physical gold with the trade surplus. So that's a very sturdy stew. You have three legs, right? You have the US dollar denominated Chinese sovereign bond that is issued offshore. You have onshore RMB, yen, Chinese sovereign bonds that are being bought by these Chinese companies with this huge US dollar trade surplus. And then the third leg is the physical gold. Okay? So that's what's happening.
So how about the fourth leg? And that fourth leg, and I say this, I'm just kind of being clever, but we talked offline and I read this last night on your Twitter feed. You write, so apparently the physically #gold accumulate product at Chinese banks is the real deal. The Chinese banks back up your gold purchase 1-to-1 with physical gold. You can either choose to get paid in fiat RMB yuan when you sell, or you can withdraw a minimum of a 10-gram gold bar. And here is the post that you have on X. What do you think about that?
That's actually something that happened recently in 2025, in like early January. So the person who broke this news is one of our mutual acquaintances. His name is Bai. His handle on X is Bai. Yeah, he really knows the stuff. He's a commodity trader out in Shanghai, and his X account is Oriental Ghost. So anyway, he broke the news about this gold accumulate program that all the major Chinese state-owned banks have launched in January of 2025. So, I'm talking about ICBC, Bank of China, China Construction Bank, etc. Right? They all launched this program at the same time. So, what is so special about this program? What is the gold accumulate program? Well, in the past, before 2025, China had paper gold. And I'm sure that some banks still have it, okay, paper gold, which is basically just a tracker fund of the gold price. So you're exposed to the gold price, up and down, etc. You make fiat RMB, yen, dollars on the price differential, but you're unable to withdraw physical gold. Okay? Like they might have it in certain paper gold products, but it's not guaranteed. It's not something that they make it easy for their customers, right? But the gold accumulate program supposedly is 1-to-1 backed physical gold. And anyone can withdraw physical gold from the China banks, from these Chinese banks. Okay? And the minimal withdrawal amount is 10 grams. Like some other banks, it's like 20 grams, but you get my point, right? 10 to 20 grams, right? So that essentially is a huge game changer because even if you account for the transaction costs, etc., your premium plus transaction cost is going to be below 2%. That's a huge deal because in the past, if you want to buy physical gold at China, you're paying 5-6% plus in premium at the gold trader or the bullion trader or the jewelry store, right? Outside of the banking system. So what we're talking about here is a huge deal in China. Apparently, a lot of people have took their savings accounts in China and took half the money and put it in this gold accumulate program.
As someone who's Chinese, from your perspective, I want to kind of dig into this just a little bit because in the United States, even though the U.S. Mint has been around since 1986 and they still produce gold and silver and platinum eagles and whatnot, the United States doesn't make it easy, nor do they speak about it. In fact, they do everything they can to more or less, especially the media, undermine the significance of what gold really is and the historical, the cultural, all of those things. How over my shoulder was President Roosevelt, where he confiscated gold, but gold was money in this country at one point. This country was really founded on a bimetallic standard. Real money used to be part of our system, and it's not. Why do you think the Chinese government is so keen on having their citizens not only understand the significance of gold in terms of savings, but also accumulated physically. In the back of your mind, or maybe you know something specifically, why do you think they move that direction when the people or the people in power in the U.S. seem to move the other direction?
That's a very good question. I have the answer for you. Because China is using physical gold as a foreign exchange discharge mechanism. Okay? I'll explain that. So, right now in the world, right? What is gold priced in? US dollar on one hand, right? At the COMEX and at the LBMA. And RMB yen in China at the SGE, which is the Shanghai Gold Exchange, right? So you have physical gold, but it is priced in two different currencies worldwide, right? So essentially what you have is you have US dollars and the RMB yen, they're exchangeable, but they have one common denominator, which is physical gold in the middle, right? So look at the RMB US dollar exchange rate right now. It's 7.33 RMB yen to one US dollar. That's the upper limit as to how, or the low limit, however, whichever way you look at it, right? It's the limit at which the PBOC will allow the RMB yen to depreciate against the US dollar. Okay, they can't let it depreciate any more than that. That's the limit to their comfort, right? So what they're doing is they're using the physical gold lever to control the health, control the US dollar RMB exchange rate. That's exactly what's happening. Think about it. They launched the gold accumulate program in January, right when, number one, the RMB yen US dollar exchange rate is pushing that 7.33 limit, and second, there's whispers in China, coming out saying that the Chinese government is going to do QE once Donald Trump gets into office. Now they didn't want to do it before Donald Trump came into office because they don't know exactly what kind of tariffs Donald Trump is going to accept on China, right? The Chinese don't know that. So they want Donald Trump to come in first, and then they will do QE. But before they do QE, what have they got to do? They got to pull this gold lever. Now, you might ask me, these things are all connected. US dollar on the gold, right? But how does China use the gold lever to keep the RMB, yen, and US dollar exchange rate in a tight range? Well, it's simple. China can buy physical gold with the US dollar surplus, right? Overseas. And that's what they're doing. And in some cases, they're also using RMB because you talked about that, right? Like how, the BRICS countries are willing to sell their commodities to China in RMB because of the US dollar denominated Chinese sovereign bond situation, right? So China is buying all this gold in USD, but it's selling the gold in China in RMB, right? So in essence, if China bid up the price of gold, the domestic Chinese guys bid up the price of gold in RMB, yen, the US dollar price of gold has to follow the RMB price of gold because it's the same piece of gold, right? Unless COMEX and LBMA want all their gold to be drained by China. And that's not acceptable to those guys. So that's why China pushed the gold aggregate button, and it is allowing its public to withdraw physical gold on a one-to-one basis from the banks. That's the real reason. Think about that.
That's very cool, and thank you for that explanation. And it does make sense. I would expect that to be a trend to accelerate. There's been a lot of talk about revaluing the price of gold. And as someone who owns a precious metals company, I don't know how many people pay attention to me talking about that, but I have for a long time. I noticed you mentioned something about it also recently, and the head of the Dutch National Bank has said we should revalue the price of gold, to get it to normalize our balance sheet. The senator from Wyoming, Cynthia Loomis, has said the same thing in regards to providing funding for a strategic Bitcoin account. And she calls for revaluing the gold held by the Federal Reserve on behalf of the Treasury to a level sufficient enough to take some of the proceeds to buy Bitcoin. There have been a lot of people, Jim Rickards, talking about gold should be revalued to $27,000 an ounce, and he derives that number by taking the M1 number and dividing it into the amount of gold that we supposedly have. You can find several sources where people are talking about gold revaluation, and this is something that you wrote about that I've talked about too, and you said people don't understand that the financial markets do this all the time. It was done in 1933, right there. Roosevelt confiscated gold in 33 from the people, paid them a premium over the $20 face value of 56 cents, which was a lot of money back then in comparison to what it is now, and then devalued the dollar and by 40%, making gold $35 an ounce. It was devalued by the marketplace in 1971 when Nixon closed the gold window. So gold revaluation is not such a fringe theory. I don't think you think so either. You think we will see a gold price revaluation? And before you answer, I think the only thing that the Americans would need to think about, or the West would need to think about, is the copious amount of gold that China has accumulated. So I'll ask you that question again. Do you think gold will be revaluated? And wouldn't this really be playing right into the hands of the Chinese, who have been aggressively producing, accumulating, and now telling their citizens, get as much as you can? You think that's on the table?
Yeah, so I think the gold revaluation, as you put it, is happening as we speak. The gold accumulate program that China has launched is exactly that. The Chinese citizens are revaluing gold. But there's not enough gold in the world if, let's say, all Chinese citizens put 20% of their savings into physical gold. There's simply not enough. At $3,000, it's not enough. I think if this program continues and the U.S.-China trade war escalates, I think the only way that there can be enough gold to satisfy this new Chinese demand for physical gold would be in upwards of $5,000 US per troy ounce of gold and above. So do you call that gold revaluation? I mean, if it's let's say a 2-3 year process just naturally,
no.
I think so. You don't call that gold. You're talking about like a sudden one?
Let me rephrase that. Yes, it's a revaluation that they're allowing to happen by letting it move up slowly, and others have said that. I guess what I mean is, do you think there'll be a Sunday night, Monday morning revaluation to a certain level, or will this just be something that they will let go higher and higher and higher and higher, benefiting the central banks?
I think they'll try managing it until they cannot. I mean, like Winston Churchill once said, the Americans always, do everything else before they do the right thing, which is revaluation, right? So I think they'll try everything else under the sun.
Understood. And then they just give up.
Then you just give up. And then
if nothing works,
Shelton,
I asked Judy Shelton the same question, and she more or less said yes, not in so many words, because she wants to issue 50-year treasuries tied to gold. I guess the point of it is that I think we both agree that gold will go much higher and will be allowed to go much higher because it benefits the banks.
Absolutely. And in Judy's case, it makes sense if gold is revalued before they do the gold bond issues. because it will cost the US government less gold in the same amount of US dollars.
Yeah, she told me that she expected it to be issued, on July 4th, 2026, the 250th year anniversary.
Wow.
That they had
Wow.
discussed it in the previous administration, and that she thinks that's what would happen. So that would mean between now and July 2026, if your theory is right, which I think is very, very smart, is what we would expect a much higher gold price by then. That gives us all something to be looking forward to, for sure. I appreciate your perspective on that. Listen, I've taken 35 minutes of your time. I will ask you one last question, and then have you tell people how they can find more of you. In fact, because your perspective is so important, so much more important than people who are only U.S. based centric understand. And I'm beginning to realize that in my discussion with you for certain. And again, I really thank you for coming on, and I guarantee you I'm going to be knocking on your door to have you come on again, because what you are talking about not only is filling in the blanks of all of the things I've spoken about for 4 years, but more than that, I think this is when you talk about global shifts of power and of influence, this is as important as it gets. So keep doing what you're doing, Eric. You're fantastic. Last question. Considering everything we've discussed, we've talked about BRICS, the gold, Chinese strategies. Let's just say, what key trends or signals do you think will define the global landscape financially over the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see all of this going in terms of perhaps this global shift in power? And is there a global shift in power underway? Really, I guess, is the question that I'm asking.
It's a very good question. So recently, just before, I believe it was just before January, in December, China announced that it didn't really announce it, showed people that it had fight-ready 6th generation bomber, fighter, and drone. And that was a shock to the, military community. People in the military circles were looking at that and said, wow, China is able to now start manufacturing these 6th generation aircrafts, which actually have directed energy weapon capability, if you know what that is. That is like microwave and laser beams from the aircrafts. So, and people were asking, why is it that China is able to do that now? Because doesn't China have problems with manufacturing the jet engines in the past? Well, let me tell you something, Andy. China did have trouble in manufacturing jet engines in the past, and the bottleneck was their material science capabilities. But the recent studies have came out, and we can see that China is actually, in terms of research and development, almost double the United States in terms of material science research. And that's how China have gotten over that bottleneck of manufacturing high-end jet engines. So if you ask me, I think militarily, China is, I wouldn't say leapfrogging, but it's definitely moving ahead.
Did I not just see a report that they produced a jet that can fly from Europe to the United States in an hour and a half? Is that true?
Yes, that's a civilian jet. So that's I would take that with a grain of salt for now, because they haven't test flight that craft yet, right? It's just something that they said. But the military craft that I mentioned, they actually flew that. I mean, people saw that in the air. So that's legit, right? In terms of the civilian, supersonic aircraft, yes, probably, but it might take a couple years before they, manufacture that craft and it gets into service, right? Now, China also, launched. Now, this is not prototype. It's actually a launch of several smaller, medium-sized aircraft carriers. I don't know how much news you guys get off that, but that's big news in China. It's expanding its aircraft carrier fleet, basically. Okay? So don't just focus on the big ones, because in the future of warfare, in the world of hypersonic missiles, you actually want medium, small-sized aircraft carriers that are more nimble. Okay? So they have that. They're launching these. So you ask me what I see in the future in terms of China and the BRICS. I see that they will keep diminishing their U.S. Treasury holdings. They will, if I dare say, de-dollarize, because that seems to be a dirty word amongst most milkshakers. They don't like to hear that. But I think, the BRICS countries, China will continue to de-dollarize and sell or let, them roll off U.S. Treasuries in the next 5 to 10 years. In terms of China's economic development, I see that, China is going to continue to develop its electric vehicle market, EV market. Okay? Now, that's twofold. Number one is what I mentioned earlier in the program when you asked me, is like EV is a high-end product that China can sell for more money, right? It's a high-value item. There's actually a second benefit to EV. Guess what? China is actually importing less crude oil in 2024 versus 2023. Okay? But China is increasing its electricity consumption. So the crude oil import decrease is not because of China being in a recession or whatever people say. It's because China is migrating from ICE vehicles to EVs. Now, if you visit China, like I do all the time, in the past, you walk into, let's say, Shenzhen or Guangzhou or Shanghai, you get a wall of smog that hits you, a wall of dirty air that hits you from the exhaust of ICE vehicles. Now you go to Shenzhen or Zhuhai or Guangzhou or Shanghai or Beijing, it feels like Hawaii. That's how clean the air is right now. And so they're helping clean up the air, but on top of that, taking Chinese manufacturing to, a high level, high value level, and also is lessening China's dependence on crude oil. Okay, so I see that continuing down the road in the next 5 to 10 years.
Eric, this has honestly been one of the most important interviews I've ever done on my channel. I can't underscore that enough. These are the trends that matter to me. These are the global macroeconomic trends that matter. The micro minutia to me is noise. I think you are spot on what you're talking about. I'm thrilled to have had you on the show. I will have you back again if you'll be gracious enough, because what you are talking about to me is going to shape on many levels the way things unfold here in the United States, largely in part due to these global macroeconomic trends that seem to be shifting eastward along with the gold. And the old rule, he who has the gold makes the rules. How can people find out more about you? I can't encourage that enough. And I want people to follow what you're talking about, because this is important.
Yeah, my X account is at King Kong 9888. So just King Kong 9888 is my X account. They can find me there, and I talk about everything, from economics to gold to silver to China to even military technologies and UAPs. I even talk about that. So it's a wide spectrum of things that I talk about on my X channel.
Yeah, and I can't say enough just how great that information is, and also how appreciative I am for you stopping in today. I wish you and your family a very happy, healthy New Year here in 2025, and all the best in the coming year, and do greatly look forward to picking up where we left off. I'll be eagerly awaiting to do that, and until next time.
Well, thank you, Andy, and thank you for having me on, and best wishes to you and your family as well. Thank you.
Thank you, my man. All the best to you, brother.
Little by Little with Andy Schechtman.